So at this session, it's always been a tradition that the president of the association delivers an association, State of the Association speech. Tends to be a little long-winded and a little boring. And so I decided that I wanted to do something quite different this year. What I wanted to do, since this convention has so many major issues going on in all three of the divisions, there's so many big questions about what's happening in the NCAA, what are the core values of the NCAA, how are we going to move forward in this really challenging and exciting time. I thought it would be more advantageous for all of you to hear from all of the leaders that you have put in place to represent each of the three divisions. It provides a great opportunity for us to hear directly from each of those people, and I'd like to call them up now on stage to join President Simon. First of all, Dr. Nathan Hatch, the president of Wake Forest University, who's also the chair of the Division I Board of Directors. Nathan?
Thank you.
Welcome. Patrick O'Brien, the president of West Texas A&M University and chair of the D2 President's Council. Pat?
How you doing, Mark?
Good to have
you.
And finally, Dr. Jack Oley, president of Gustav Adolphus and chair of the D3 Board.
Thanks, Mark.
Jack, good to have you here.
We get a bump?
So what we want to do in this bit of time that we have, not an awful lot of time, but a little bit of time, is talk about and think about some of the great big challenging questions that are confronting intercollegiate athletics today. At the convention, this meeting, it's a great time for us to spend a little bit of time thinking about and reflecting on what are the core functions, what are the core values of the NCAA, what makes us distinctive and different from all other sports-related activities that go on out there. There's plenty of sports associations and sports leagues that do many of the things that we do. You know, the NFL and the NBA and the Olympics and a whole variety of national and even international sports associations that organize games, that set up playing rules, that make sure that the integrity of the game is maintained, that host championships, that promote and develop the games and help market them and bring a lot of value to those games. We do that, and we do it very, very well in all three of our divisions and all 89 of our championships and each of the sports that you all are involved in and that you oversee and that our student athletes play. But there's one huge differentiator between what happens in the NCAA and what happens in all those other sports associations or leagues. And that is that we do it in the context of higher education. And we have to have always in front of us, foremost on our minds, the notion that this is about young men and young women who come to our institutions for an education, to develop their skills athletically, but also in all of their abilities to move forward in life, to go out of our universities as people that have all the skill and ability that they need to provide, as Dr. Andrews has done all of his career, the kinds of health and safety that supports those young people. We worry about and have to always be focused on the development of student athletes and their success. If we're not focused on that, if that's not at the forefront of what this association is all about, then we really don't differentiate ourselves from everyone else. That's the big differentiator. That's what both makes the NCAA distinct from the rest of the athletic world, and it also is what unites all three divisions, because the divisions may approach those things somewhat differently, but they all have to deal with that same question of how do we help and support our student athletes. So we need to, at this convention and in other places, routinely ask ourselves, does the current model of how we support student athletes make sense today? Are we doing everything that we can to support those athletes and their goals of success in the classroom, on the field, on the court, and as they go out and transition into life and become professionals in their world endeavors? Are we structuring a model that they can capitalize on all the things that all of your campuses provide them in terms of educational opportunities and internships and study abroad opportunities and all the variety of other things that we so justly pride ourselves on as academic leaders? Are they graduating from our institutions with the skills and abilities to go out and be successful? Do they have the time to develop those skills? And are we shaping the experiences that will allow them to be successful? Are we using the very best practices and the very best science to make sure that we've got health and wellness policies in place that we know are doing everything possible with the best information that we know to benefit those student athletes and keep them safe and successful? Are our playing rules, are the ways we govern the games currently the best that we can or should do in 2014? All of those and similar issues, I think, are things that are on the agendas for each of the three divisions. They're things that you've all come here to San Diego to talk about, and we need to turn first and foremost to our colleagues here on stage and ask them some of those questions and others. So I'd like to begin, since we don't have an awful lot of time, with President Hatch, and ask a simple question. Well, it's not a simple question. The answer is very complicated. The question is pretty simple. Many of you know Division I is in the middle of re-examining its governance process, and we just finished a conversation about that. In fact, I think it was quite successful with about 800 of the members there. And one of the things we heard again and again is, can this change in governance allow Division I to more effectively address the needs of student athletes? What about that change in the governance model are you excited about, and how can it help manage the decision-making process of the membership so that students are at the front of the agenda?
Yeah, I think it holds that promise in several respects. First is the focus of the board itself. To the extent that the board becomes more engaged in strategic issues and focuses on the core mission and purpose of the NCAA, I think it will perforce be spending more time on student-athlete well-being. I think the board in the past has been involved in approving things that came from other places, but if it moves beyond that, I think it will be more focused on issues such as academic standards, graduation rates. Are students thriving in all dimensions of their life? Are they being prepared academically and socially for the professions after they leave the college? What is their success 5 years out? Are we willing to ask that? Are we mitigating sports injuries? And those kinds of issues I think the board will be more interested in. Secondly, I think the new plan will call for new engagement by athletic directors. And I think that will better surface issues related to student athletes and provide swifter and more appropriate responses to the challenge that they face. A third area is that hopefully the new structure will enhance communication to the members, to conferences, to individual institutions. And similarly, that will be a way to better focus on student-athlete needs. Finally, with respect to the well-resourced conferences, in a sense, the latitude that they are seeking has to do with being able to spend more money on behalf of student-athletes. Things like full cost of attendance or other forms of educational assistance. I think that's an additional way which will be very pro-student in its orientation.
Good. Pat, Division II has a somewhat different governance structure, as does Division III. I've said in many of your meetings where you two focus on what's going on in the lives of your student athletes. Do you have any thoughts or advice for your colleagues over in Division I about how they could craft their governance structure to help them stay focused on student success, and what lessons might there be from D2 in that regard?
Well, thank you, Mark. Are you going to listen to me? In my opinion, there are several aspects of the governance structure of D2 that really support well the educational experience and development of our student athletes. And I'll talk about two of them. Back around 2005, 2006, there was, I think, bold action taken on the part of the presidents and chancellors of Division II. They wanted to have a clearly articulated statement of what D2 was all about. And in the first paragraph of the strategic positioning platform, which is our guiding principles, it is stated that the educational experience of student athletes is paramount. Students come first. And I can tell you in all the discussions that I've been in the President's Council and Management Council, when we've been talking about changing processes or legislative action, we always go back to that statement. Educational experience of student athletes is paramount. A second aspect of the governance structure of D2 that I think works extremely well for us is we have a very, very strong National Student Athlete Advisory Committee. Very strong. It is comprised of a group of incredibly talented and dedicated students. And these students, we engage in the legislative process of Division II. We engage them from the concept stage of legislative proposals all the way to providing them a voice on the floor at our business session at which we take votes on that legislation. Now, they don't operate in a vacuum. They solicit input from conference SACs and from the institutional SACs. In July, we have a joint meeting of Management Council with the student athletes. This morning, we had a joint breakfast. Student Athlete Advisory Committee, Management Council, President's Council. We try to have a dialogue, and the students are the voice of the customer. And they constantly remind us, as does that strategic positioning platform, what is most important, and that is the educational development of our students. Now, what doesn't work well is if we exclude any one of our stakeholders from being part of the governance structure. That doesn't work well at all. We've got to make sure that we have input. Presidents, chancellors, student athletes, commissioners, ADs, coaches, athletic administrators. We've got to bring all the voices to the table. Now, in my opinion, if we need to change something, we need to enhance the opportunity for the coaches in Division II to have a greater say.
So Nathan, did you take the advice or not?
I did.
Okay, good, good. Well, Pat, let me stay with that,
All right.
the issue of Division II for a minute, because you, in Division II, and you and your colleagues have, I think, justifiably and understandably are proud of the notion of life in the balance, and you passed, in the past handful of years, you passed some reform agenda items that tried to limit some of the time commitments that student athletes have and constrain some of the schedules so that it provided more opportunity just in the calendar year for student athletes. At the same time, of course, I know that Division II is also talking about, well, maybe we should allow coaches to have access to athletes in the summertime for strength and conditioning work, and some of that starts to sound like, well, maybe you're creeping a little bit away from some of that commitment, and maybe that starts to look a bit like what we see in Division I. How do you, as a leader in Division II, and with your colleagues in the Management Council and fellow presidents, how do you strike that balance? I mean, everybody wants to win, everybody wants to be competitive, everyone wants their student athletes ready to play more, but on the other hand, we were talking earlier about the need for them to have time to do all the other things that will develop them as young men and women. What advice do you have for everybody as they debate that issue?
Well, that's a great observation with regard to the full-time student athlete year-round, and you have some excellent questions associated with that. In D2, we're very, very proud of the progress that we made with Life in the Balance. We think that through the Life in the Balance initiatives that were passed in 2010, 2011, we're able to provide greater opportunity for our student athletes to take advantage of the full college experience. On the other hand, I think we've got to continually explore ways in which we can provide greater opportunities. And I think we've also got to be continually vigilant that we don't fall back, slide back, and repeat the old ways. You talk about trade-offs. With regard to athletics, I think there's a set of trade-offs that we potentially have to be concerned about. Trade-off, academics, athletics, campus engagement, athletics, community engagement, athletics. Now, when I think about those potential trade-offs, I work with three premises. First, the primary purpose for our existence as institutions of higher education is to educate, cultivate, and graduate women and men so that they can thrive in their careers and in their lives. That's paramount. That's the first premise. But the second premise is that not all learning that takes place on our campus takes place in the classroom. If we appropriately handle intercollegiate athletics, it's an extension of the learning process, what we do in the classroom. Students can learn the soft skills, those skills that are necessary for them to thrive. We can do the same thing with campus engagement. Students participate in student organizations, student government, or with community engagement, service learning. And then I go to my third premise. Anything done in excess has harmful impacts. So we can concentrate too much on any one of those aspects of trade-offs. And we found ourselves in 2010, we started in 2008, we came to the position that we had reached that point of in excess with regard to athletics. And that's the reason why we came up with the Life in the Balance initiatives, in which we changed the start date for students to come back for practice in the fall, in which we shortened the playing season, in which we decreased the number of competitions. And all of that was designed to give students more time so that they could experience that full college experience. But to be honest, I think that's the easy part. That's the easy part. How do we accommodate the students who want to engage in a study abroad program, a semester exchange program, an internship, a co-op? What about that student that wants to take off for a year to study in China? How do we handle that? And here's the really tough ones for me, Mark. I hear from some students that their dream is to pursue a career in nursing, or to major in pre-med, or to become an engineer. But they're discouraged from doing so because in every one of those, you have lab courses, and those lab courses are generally in the afternoon, and that's when the coaches want to practice. Now, I don't think that you can legislate that away. I think the solution for that has to come from the top, from the message that we as chancellors and presidents give throughout our campus, to our ADs, to our coaches, our administrators. And that message is simple. The primary purpose for our existence as institutions of higher education is to educate, cultivate, and graduate women and men so that they can thrive in their lives and in their careers. And if it means to accommodate a student who wants to pursue nursing and take biology lab courses in the afternoon or chemistry lab courses in the afternoon, change the practice time. It's that simple. We allow for students to utilize their 4 years of eligibility in 10 semesters. Allow a student to go study for a year in China, if that's their passion. They'll come back and they'll be just as good as when they left, because they'll probably work out while they're there. We've got to be more accommodating, but that's got to be the message that we as presidents and chancellors give to the rest of our campus.
Good, thank you. So Jack, in Division III, you have some different pressures. You're not pushed to play a football game on a Tuesday night by ESPN, right?
Right.
Unless you have news to announce.
No, we don't.
But on the other hand, you have, for example, a really interesting time pressure that's different than the other two divisions. You're now debating whether or not you ought to have recruiting seasons for coaches, because today you don't have one.
Right.
And the other two divisions do have them, and you've got coaches that are saying, my goodness, I got to recruit 12 months out of the year, and prospective student athletes are getting recruited 12 months out of the year. And so it's almost the inverse sort of pressure in some ways, and you're debating that. How are you trying to address these issues in Division III right now? What do you think that conversation is going to look like here and into the future?
Actually, Mark, I think that conversation is very exciting. And Pat, you can change practice times and get students to participate in labs and to do those things. And as I sit here, I think the three divisions have more in common than they have differences. Certainly there's opportunities for athletes at the other two divisions to do things that we can't provide in Division III. We have fairly restrictive rules. Our playing seasons, our contests are limited, and out-of-season contact is very difficult. Coaches can't meet with students, and they can't participate with them as athletes because they're members of the student council, or they're singing in the choir, or they're doing things that are important to their life as a student. Most of those restrictions that we placed on Division III came in 2004. And we need to assure that student athletes have as much time as possible to pursue those non-athletic type interests. Our D3 member surveys and the SAC group keep telling us we're on the right track. And so from our standpoint, we're thinking about how we can address the concerns of the coach, how we can address the concerns of the athlete. Our challenge is to communicate the benefits of athletics to our students, to prospective students, to get them to think of coming to college to continue an opportunity to play, to be part of a team. Often parents today, unfortunately, believe more equals better. I'm referring to the youth culture. We face that, every division faces that. Some believe that athletic scholarships are more important than academic scholarships. D3 has about 25 to 30% on average participation of our students in athletic programs. Some schools go up as far as 50%. With current enrollment and financial challenges facing private and public institutions, we must address the tough questions. D3 is discussing many of those questions here this weekend. And how do we recruit, Mark, as you ask, more effectively, more efficiently? Athletics must serve the educational mission, Pat, as you said, of the academy. Not dictate the mission. We must keep athletics in perspective. And that's how we're dealing with it at Division III.
Let me shift gears a little bit, Jack, and talk about why institutions play these games and why they're willing to make financial investments, because you have very modest revenue streams.
Right.
There's this complete misunderstanding about money in college sports. People think all universities and colleges are
Right.
rolling in money because they play sports, and we know that the exact opposite's true. But universities and colleges make decisions to play sports to benefit student athletes, but also to benefit the institution, right? It's a great way to build social glue that holds the community together. It's a great way to recruit students who may or may not be athletes. It's a great way to build alumni support who may become donors, even political support, and we all recognize that. Division III schools might say we're going to start a football program because we want to attract more male students, or whatever the model is. So it becomes an enrollment management tool. But when an institution, a university or college, is getting an institutional benefit from those sports, what concomitant responsibility do they have to make an investment not just in fielding a team, but fielding a team that's got all the health and safety issues taken care of, got all the right support structures in place, got all the right academic support issues resolved, all of the other things that will allow students to be successful, so that it's more than just can we afford uniforms and a coach and a bus. It's can we also afford all the things that allow our students to be successful. How do you strike a balance in all of that?
That balance is very difficult. And we struggle with it at all of our Division III institutions. There's no doubt about it. We have limitations. But my joy is sitting with an athlete who has come to Gustavus to play football, or a woman athlete to play volleyball, and to hear her excitement about continuing her sport, and then thinking about how we can do the things that are necessary for that man or that woman to have the best education. And then fast forward 2 or 3 years, and all of a sudden you find that student not participating in that sport, but they're still at Gustavus because we recruited them as students that play athletics. For us, that's easy because we don't have the athletic scholarship. So it's a little bit different there. But what we're trying to do is think of how we can model a unique way for students to participate without athletic aid. Now, every president out here and everyone who works at a D3 institution will tell you that our students receive as much aid as most athletes at other divisions. But it's done differently. It's done with a model that enables us to do academics, to do need-based aid, and to provide for our students the resources that are necessary. As I commented earlier, the important thing is that we must understand that we're not there to just participate in athletics. We must guard against the playing seasons being extended, and the contests being extended, and the out-of-season participation. Right now, we're dealing with a helmet issue. Our football coaches want to have the students have a helmet on when they have their exercises in the spring. They're allowed to do that, but they don't have any equipment. And the presidents have dealt with that very directly and said, that takes it a step too far. And that's not what we are trying to accomplish. Looking at an association-wide things for D3, we have 450 institutions, and they're all different. And we have 45 voting conferences, and we have 175,000 athletes. It's my hope that we can be an example in looking at how we can recruit those student athletes that understand the model of a unique opportunity to participate. We must also give student athletes time to pursue education. Pat, I think you were right on target. How do they study away? How do they get engaged? They're making a huge investment in their education to come to a D3 school. And it is our responsibility to have return on that investment. D3's top priority is academic success naturally. And I think every division would say that. We must hire and support coaches and administrators who support the D3 philosophy. We're not in competition. as much as people say, well, you know, that student could go to a D2 school, that student might go to a D1 school and play in the 3rd or 4th or 5th year. We are about trying to find a way that students can answer the question and encourage them to really be on campus in an active way, as you say, with community activities and all of the study programs that they have, community service. It is critical to listen in order to involve and trust our students. SAC, many of our Division III SAC members are here, and they are vital to who we are, and you said that, Pat. You know, I think D3 is the only division that actually has members of the SAC serve on the management council with vote. I would suggest that that's something we all ought to consider. You said it, and we've all said the importance of the voice of the student is extremely important. When we listen to athletes, we learn. Again, with so many D3 schools being tuition dependent and having a high percent of students participating in athletics, all of this is fundamental to our collective success. This is the D3 philosophy. We don't feel we're any better than D2 or D1. In fact, I think we have more in common, as I said earlier. This is an exciting time for the NCAA. And Mark, I applaud you for the direction you're taking with giving us a chance to think of the student athlete and how we do that. And as we've talked at the executive committee meeting, really providing opportunities for a very large part of our student athletes, not just 1 or 2% of them.
So Nathan, and I'm going to ask Luana this question also. The financial issues that allow resources to be available to support student athletes are obviously different at Division I in many respects. One of the conversations that we've been hearing during the D1 dialogue and the debate about governance structure has been that if schools have greater resources and can support some student athletes with greater resources, it creates some competitive advantage. You want to make sure that you've got something approaching competitive fairness across schools, but on the other hand, you don't want to hold people back from supporting students in their level of success. That's going to be one of the debates that's raging right now in Division I governance. How do we strike a balance on that? And I'd love to hear Luana weigh in on this one too. What do you hope that the D1 members will be looking at and keep their focus on as they wade their way through that? Because it's a pretty knotty question.
I think whatever our financial situation, and obviously that varies greatly in Division I, we must keep our focus not only on success on the athletic field, but on educating the whole person. And we cannot skimp on the academic demands, on academic support, on investing in social and professional skills, working to build a culture where graduation is prized, expected, is the coin of the realm. When it comes to greater resource conference, I mean, the challenges are greater. And I would say in many fields, excellence does not require balance. It does not, so that athletes come to our institutions who want to be the best at what they do. And in some ways, that cannot be a purely balanced life. They want to be the very best. And at the same time, it means that those institutions must make sure that athletics is not all that they have, and that we're deeply engaged in these broader dimensions of education. I would say one thing. I would use a scriptural phrase that John Kennedy used often, and Bill Gates, and that is, to whom much is given, much is expected. And I think as the larger conferences, if they provide more support for student athletes, they should hold themselves to a higher bar. We should be graduating students better. We should be willing to look 5 years out to see what they're doing, to make sure that that support is not just another enticement in recruiting, but it really is substantive help for the long-term well-being of these students.
Good. Luana, what do you think about that same issue?
I would add to that I think we have a responsibility if we believe that intercollegiate athletics is one of those both tangible and intangible parts that is part of our educational responsibility to have broad-based programs as our resources grow, to be able to accommodate as many student athletes as possible in sports that may not be as high profile as the ones that are defined by the high resource conference, because that's part of our educational responsibility, as Jack and Pat have talked about the role of athletics in the context of a collegiate model. I would also say that as an institution that may not see itself always as having the largest resources, we compete with one another academically without worrying so much about whether we're leveling the playing field through the rules. I have to compete with the same faculty for NIH grants, and I don't get sort of a different set of rules from some institution that may have a much larger academic health center than I do. So there's a little bit of this equality component in competition that isn't about the rest of our academic experiences. And I think we need to set that aside and to think about that a little bit differently in this resource-constrained world that we're all in.
Good. I want to shift gears completely now, but get back to something we were talking about a minute ago around really the demands on students' time, if I could. So I think, Nathan, you said it very nicely that balance is hard to describe when someone's trying to achieve excellence. Doesn't matter whether it's physics or football, whatever they want to be good at, they're going to focus a lot of time on. But we also aspire to make sure that student athletes, when they go out in the world, are successful in their profession, that they can go get a job. We know that less than 1% of our total students go off to become professional athletes. They're going to, as our ads say, go pro in something other than sports, and we want to make sure that they're ready and willing and able to do that. And that means that they, as several of you said, we got to find more creative ways of allowing them to use their time. I've heard, I've heard recently some interesting notions about how to do that. It's been part of the D1 governance debate. Can we establish big blocks of time where we just mandate that students have no sports contact? They don't, there's just some chunk of time that's a dead period. Can we think about the notion, especially in Division I, where we know student athletes in some sports are putting in 30 to 40 hours a week? Well, that's a full-time commitment, right? And if they were working full-time in a job, we would probably expect them to graduate in 6 years instead of 4 or 5. Can we say, okay, this is a 6-year commitment instead of a 4 or 5 year commitment, so that they can say, all right, I get another year to go do my study abroad or go do my internship or whatever I want to do? Can we think in terms of scholarships that aren't commitments for a time period, 4 or 5 years, but they're a commitment for a bachelor's degree, however long that takes? And I'll go try playing professional ball in Europe, and I can come back to Michigan State and finish up and do my internship and become a CPA or whatever it is. How flexible do you think the membership can or should be in thinking about, at all 3 divisions, how you can create more time? There's no more hours in the day. You can't create more hours. Can you create more days by saying, look, this is a longer term commitment, or does that make any sense?
I think we need to be as creative as possible on behalf of our student athletes. I do remember one time at Notre Dame, a varsity basketball player wanted to go to London for a summer program, and so we installed in a squash court regulation basketball court so he could shoot free throws. But I do think one does have to say, how can these athletes sometimes be saved from themselves? Because
sure.
So often...
You guys don't want to hear that over there, but...
So often they and their coaches want to spend as much possible time. And I also think coaches at times need to be saved from themselves. At an ACC meeting, the Duke women's basketball coach said, please limit our recruiting season, because if you don't, we will do it without stop. So I do think we need to be creative in in giving coaches and students some break from the intensity of that kind of competition.
Yeah, because it seems to be growing, not shrinking. I haven't heard anybody voluntarily backing down. You've done some of it in D2, but not voluntarily, right? You had to. It's
mandatory.
Well, I know that, but that's what I'm saying. You had to impose it. Coaches and athletes wouldn't have voluntarily said, "Oh no, I don't want to." I don't want. Yeah, you had to impose it. So, Luana, what do you think about how flexibly should the membership think about this issue?
I think it really is critical for us to be creative, and I think my colleagues have outlined some strategies to do that. I like a lot the idea that I can come and go with more flexibility. We have raised private dollars to bring people back so that they can finish their degrees, because we think it's really so important for them to do that, and it's key for the institution to be able to support that. But I think also I see in our own students in other fields the pressure of jobs, the pressure of getting everything out of their experience. We're having to drag some students out of multimedia labs who are doing films 24 hours a day because they see that as the way in which they're going to make their mark. And it does take folks saying, wait, there's more to this than that narrow experience. We need you to leave Michigan State, any of our institutions, having experienced the full range of what we can offer for you today and for tomorrow.
Yeah, Jack?
As I sit here, Mark, I'm thinking, and my colleagues are hitting it right on the head with many of their comments and how it affects their divisions. Division 3 is in a little different situation in that, we are dependent totally on external support, and we don't pay our athletes scholarships. However, our athletes are participating at very high levels, doing wonderful things, and we're talking to them about the return on their investment. I mentioned that earlier. We're starting to talk at many of our schools in D3 about the return on the education, and I think D1 can do that. I think D2 can do that. We are providing an education for young men and women that give them a lifetime of success, not just sports success. There's 1 or 2% that are going to be looking toward that. But the beauty of what we offer, and you said it earlier in your opening comments, is that we have an opportunity to provide an education for students to learn inside and outside the classroom, in the sports arena. And our students are going away after graduation and not going after that first high-paying job because they know they have the education, they can get that next paying job, the second or third job down the road. And those are the kind of things that I think we all have to look at and help educate our students.
Good. So, nice segue to what probably has to be the last question. I'll throw you the softball, Luana. Pay for play, right? So everyone these days is talking about pay for play. There's a huge debate about what does that really mean. For some people, that's turning student athletes into fully employed, unionized members of a professional class. To others, it's providing a full cost of attendance stipend and everything in between. Tell us what you think about this whole issue. I know. And then if you answer really fast, there's time for me to put Nathan on the spot too.
Right.
So
we have a countdown clock for those of you who probably, that gives me 3.5 minutes to answer this question in a way that's comprehensive. And I've already used about 20 seconds of that.
Yeah, you're stalling.
In the process. We are a set of institutions that believe in cross-subsidy. We have academic programs that are more or less higher performing in terms of their revenue stream. We have academic programs that are lower performing in their revenue stream, and we believe in cross-subsidy. In intercollegiate athletics, almost all of us in this room use institutional funds, not profits from athletic events, to really pay for the opportunities we're providing our student athletes, because we believe those opportunities are really important. Interesting, when I was with a corporate set of folks and they were talking about their corporations, they have divisions that are profitable and they have divisions that are not very profitable. And if you think about the auto companies in Michigan, you can use some examples of that. They don't necessarily believe they need to compensate their workforce, their talent pool differently in a profitable division and an unprofitable division. We essentially provide the same benefits, tangible and intangible, to student athletes who are in areas that are generating revenue and in areas that are not necessarily generating revenue. I'm a conference that shares revenue equally without regard to who generated it, because we believe so passionately that this enterprise called intercollegiate athletics is valuable collectively to us as institutions, but more importantly to the student athletes who participate. I think we have to keep that at foremost. And I would say that also I see myself as the president for the 99% of student athletes, not the 1%. And there are many stories written about the 1% who think that they can gain more from participating in sport than from their education. I say personally they should go off and do that. And we shouldn't be constrained by others outside of the collegiate model for those students to be able to go off and pursue their dreams as they would choose, anytime they would choose.
Good. She left she left a minute or two for you, Nathan. So what about you?
Well, I think there are many unintended consequences of paying college athletes, and so in general, I'm opposed to it. I think one issue is generally when sports writers talk about this, they talk about paying people in the money sports, and obviously our institutions tend to treat scholarships across the board, and so I think it could have very damaging effects on other sports, particularly women's sports, if in fact a substantial part of the revenues are going to football and basketball. I actually think it gives the wrong incentive for why someone should be a student athlete. In some ways, I wish there were more opportunities for someone who just wanted to be an athlete, like there are in baseball, to just go do that and not necessarily use college as a farm team for a professional aspiration. But I think one has to think very carefully. I mean, another issue in our free market economy, it is the case that generally the star athlete gets paid more, and I think that's the kind of direction this would go if in fact we begin paying athletes. So we would be recruiting athletes and potentially paying substantial amounts to get stars.
Good. Well, thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in thanking your elected leaders for their comments. Thank you all. Thank you.
Thank you.
That's good. Oh, wow. Good job.
Thank you.
That's good.
Good job.
That's good. Good job.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mark.
You're going to bring us home.
I'll do it. Well, thanks again, Mark, on behalf of the association for your leadership and your commitment to academic, athletic, and personal success for our student athletes. And this is an interesting format. I hope others enjoyed it as well. So again, thank you for your leadership. I should note that highlights from this session will be available on ncaa.org immediately following this session. The delegate